Hey guys and girls, Board Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about Chapter 7 of Stranger Things 3. It is called The Bite. Full spoilers from the start of this review as always, as we're getting close to the finale of the season. And this episode is directed by the Duffer Brothers, written and directed by them. Their first in a while, I think, and boy, it really shows, because the quality of just about every scene in this episode is really high. This is, I'm going to say, I think, one of the best episodes of the whole show altogether, not just this season. It's certainly a standout from this season, but everything is just so on point. There's some great visual flair and touches, some great transitions. And just the way everything connects together is so very neat and satisfying. So we continue on the night of the 4th of July, and the opening scene is actually at the fairground, where the mayor continues his bid to kind of, put on a show and distract everyone about some of the dodgy shit that he's got going on beneath the surface. So he's putting on fireworks for everyone, because what speaks Americana and the 4th of July more than fireworks? He's ramping the crowd up. But the touch to this scene that I really like is then you've got Karen, her husband, and the youngest daughter all on the big wheel, and there's a nice little touch of Karen, because the wheel stops and they're like, well, what's going on? And Karen reveals that she slipped the guy some money, like a $5 or $5 to stop it, just because it's a nice view up there and it's all romantic and stuff. But what I like about the scene is how the daughter actually notices the trees moving and is all suspicious of it, and Karen's like, forget about the trees, just look at the scenery, just look at the fireworks, this is happy 4th of July. And you sort of appreciate that Karen just wants to have a good night out, but that's kind of the whole point of the scene, is that this is all for show, this is all hiding some dark secrets and some shady stuff that's going on. And I sort of just like the touch of the young daughter, the child in the family, being the one who spots this and is the one who's actually suspicious. But that's on point with the theme of this show. Anyway, great direction in this scene with the shot of the fireworks and the trees, and as it sort of glides along and into the titles, it's a great way to open up. And great stuff with all the characters, really. So I'll start with the Owl and that group, because that eventually multiplies into the Steve group, which is just really satisfying stuff. So at the start of this episode, they're all huddled together in the cabin, and they start to sense that the mind flare is already there, then it's already caught up with them. And at first it's well, is it just the fireworks? But no, it's lurking in the area, and we get on this full-on battle between the teens and the mind flare. And again, it's a very high-octane, very intense scene. Now, what I like about it is just the teamwork and the way they all work together. It's very satisfying to watch. And another good thing about the scene is that we do get a bit of badass action here and Nancy, which is satisfying, because she's got a shotgun, and at one point she's shooting away at it and is getting into it, and eventually I think the bullets run out and she can't quite continue it, and so she gets into trouble. So you get really high stakes in this scene, and Al eventually saves her, but then Al is having a power struggle with the monster, and even she's struggling to have the strength to overpower it. And I like the role that Lucas plays. This is a strong Lucas episode, because he eventually uses some sort of a sharp object to cut its tentacles and eventually saves 11, and it's a whole thing. But watching them, work as a group and fight this thing off, but this scene obviously sells the threat and the strength of this thing. The fact that this is probably their toughest test so far. They have to flee because even 11's been overpowered and wounded by this thing. So they go to like a store so that they can get supplies and they can patch Hal up. And I like this whole thing of them having to think on their feet, them having to go to this abandoned store in the middle of the night to like get supplies, I should say. And so, as I said, there's some good stuff with Lucas in this episode. I really like the whole new Coke thing with him and Mike when Lucas is like slushing away on new Coke and the others are just looking at him and it's like, what are you doing, pal? And he and Mike, because Mike's like, how can you like this stuff? And Lucas starts using this metaphor, saying how great it is, and he starts like using the thing as an analogy. So he uses the thing versus the old theme, like the original version of the thing, the 50s film, and he uses that as an analogy. And Mike says you can't use that as an analogy. And another like good scene with Lucas is that when they're supposed to be looking for like something to help Hal out, is then he has this idea. Oh, also I love the Mr. T cereal that they go past at one point. Down this aisles you've got all sorts of like breakfast cereals, and they're all on like a theme, and one of them is like Mr. T on the front, which is really great. But anyway, Lucas comes across this dynamite and he just has this idea of using dynamite to blow the thing up. So I sort of like this Luke like thinking on its feet, and Max is like questions this and says really our best hope is to get Elle back and use her power, and Lucas is like, but she's gonna need support, and he may have a point, so I can see that maybe playing into it and stuff. But it's a big episode like that for the kids. A lot of them, talking about strategy. Mike and Al also sort of make up. There's a really sweet scene with them. And yeah, there's some great stuff. But eventually they come because Dustin actually like contacts Mike when they're at the store, and there's a lack of communication. I'll talk about Dustin and the group in a minute, but it is funny him going back to Erica asking for some A4 batteries or whatever it is. That's really funny because the mic runs out, or the walkie-talkie. But in any case, he tells them where he is, and they're in danger of the Russians. And the Russians are like homing in on them, like they're hiding behind the counter, and the Russians are there ready to shoot them. And now out of nowhere, like the car, as in like the model car in the mall, goes flying, and it's because Elle has started controlling it, and she eventually like saves them and kills the Russian, and you just get this beautiful reuniting of the group and these characters who have slowly been like moving together, but they've been torn apart earlier in the season. And it's such a great thing because the reactions are just so perfect. You can tell the writers really know what they're doing with this scene. They make every little bit count, because just a little thing like Lucas going to Erica, what the hell are you doing here? And they're sort of talking each other up, because most of the others in the other group, in fact, I don't think any of them know who Robin is. So there's like, who's this? And Steve explains, she works with me, she's Robin. And Dustin is like bigging Robin up because he starts saying things like, she cracked the code, the Russian code, she's really cool. And I just love all this stuff, because it works so well because they do have a lot of things to catch each other up on and a lot to catch up on. Because another thing is Robin has never met Al and doesn't have any ideas about her powers as well. So I really love that. And the group, comes together by the end of the episode. And the dramatic ending is that Al does pass out. That's at a point where they've reunited and stuff. So she starts having some sort of a seizure. So that's the big dramatic end of the episode. So let's talk about Robin and Steve, because this is a really big episode for them and such a massive moment for them as characters. And their scene in the bathroom in the mall in this episode is one of the high points of the show altogether, not just this season. So what happens is they're still high from the interrogation from the last episode, and it's very amusing watching Dustin and Erica, having to go it alone and help them, because it's basically the younger children having to step up as adults and help the older ones. And you see the whole thing about them escaping on this buggy, and then them trying to hide from the Russians while trying to sort of keep Steve and Robin in line. And of course they go into a cinema to hide. They go to Back to the Future, and it's just absolutely glorious. And this is the sort of thing where I think people might complain about them shoving the 80s in your face a bit too much. But who's going to complain about a scene with the characters hiding out in a cinema and Back to the Future's playing? That's just great shit to me. And it obviously makes sense. They're in this mall. It's the 80s. They're in a cinema. Back to the Future's one of the big films of the era. So I really don't have a problem with it. I also like how Dustin tries to defend the strategy by saying that Oswald hid out in the cinema, and Erica's yeah, but he was shot. And Dustin replies with, yeah, but that was a week later. And she's like, whatever, the fact is it didn't work for him. But it's obviously not a bad idea to try and blend in. But it becomes this whole comic type farce where they're trying to keep on top of Robin and Steve because they know them, they're high and a bit out of control, a bit loopy. Robin and Steve just riffing off each other and laughing is really funny. But at one point Erica and Dustin have to, or they go and sit somewhere else because there's not enough seats for all four of them to sit together. So you get this whole comedy of errors almost where things get a bit out of control because Robin and Steve leave the cinema at one point and Dustin and Erica don't realise. It's where the hell are those two gone? And then them trying to understand the plot of Back to the Future is so funny because Robin picks up was that dude's mum trying to hit on him? And then she's explaining to Steve where the title comes from, Back to the Future, and the logic of it, and it's just so glorious. But anyway, then you get the famous bathroom scene where they stumble into the bathroom, they're laughing, they're joking, they're still sort of out of it and high. And it's at that point then, first of all, I think you get a Back to the Future, Pulp Fiction type reference. It could be, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but Steve says, have you OD'd, Robin? And I just sort of read that as because her mum, Uma Thurman, was in Pulp Fiction and she OD'd in a famous scene, then that could be a reference. But anyway, they start talking. Steve actually confesses his feelings for Robin, actually kind of describes this girl who went to school with him for years every day, sat in the back class, who he never appreciated, and how really she's the coolest, she cracked this Russian code. And he does this sort of whole thing where he's like clearly talking about Robin without actually naming her. And this is just such great subversion, this scene, because clearly in the previous episodes they've set all this up and set up this chemistry and seem to be heading for like an inevitable romance. And although you won't complain about a romance, it's the sort of thing where it would just be the obvious thing to do. But of course they subvert this. They're very, very smart in what they do, because Robin, when she realises Steve's like feelings for her, and it turns out he's misread the situation, because he obviously misunderstood what she was saying. She explains that she was obsessed with him for a different reason for what he was thinking. She was obsessed with him because he was obsessed with Tammy, who's the girl who Robin had a crush on in school, and sat near Steve and all the rest of it. And it's sort of funny. They do make it like a comedy moment out of it, where it takes Steve a few moments to like cotton on, but it's such a beautiful, such a nicely played, subtle little scene, and it's just this great way for like a character to come out in the 1980s, where obviously it's so much harder to come out of the closet back then. And obviously it shows what a stand-up guy Steve is, and he doesn't freak out at all, and he actually like makes her feel a lot better. And it's just like a cool scene between friends, because he starts saying, yeah, Tammy's cute and all that, but you can do way better. And have you heard her singing? And they start like mocking her singing, because he mocks her because she just wants to be a singer, and he starts impersonating her. And it's just this great pick-me-up for Robin, because she starts laughing and they start both doing like Tammy impersonations. But it's a great scene. It's a fantastic standout scene. So emotional, so funny, so charming, and so well handled. It's literally one of the best scenes in the whole show, and this is a show packed with great scenes. But it's a credit to the writers, and the actors do a great job in the scene as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they do anything else with Robin next season, where she might actually have a relationship. They might actually show a relationship. Now, I don't know if you necessarily need that so much. It could just be that it's important for them to have a character like this in this show, and to have that sort of moment and reveal, because obviously if it's hard to come out now, it's even harder to come out back then. So, but just fantastic stuff. It's the scene of the episode without a doubt. So really, really cool stuff. And I just love the whole dynamic between Robin and Steve. And it's almost this thing where it's so perfect, and in a way they do work better as friends anyway, although I could sort of see them as a couple. But it's just so, I don't know, beautiful than the writers feel, then this is a much more interesting way to go. Then they don't have to be a couple. So that's really cool stuff. It's obviously a standout. So I'm going to talk about the Hopper, Joyce, Alexei stuff now. And they obviously head to the fairground, and You get Murray doing his matchmaking thing again, which he did in season 2, so that could be a reference to that, but obviously it's something which drives Rachel up the wall, and I'm not that keen on it, but it's the whole thing about, you've obviously got sexual tension, and anyway, it is what it is. It's a comedy scene, but it's in the car. But when they get to the fairground, there's some really good stuff there, because they're looking for like this sort of important place in the fairground, and there's some good visual stuff in the fairground. So as Joyce and Hopper are looking for this thing, Alexei is introduced to American culture by Murray. Like they start, taking parts on the ride and this game, and like Alexei wins Woody the Woodpecker, which is adorable, and it's really fun stuff. But once again, the show does a great job. The drama of it does a great job in setting you up for a tragic sort of ending in the next scene, because of course, with it being so happy and these characters, it then sets up Alexei to be killed, because it's in the Russians' best interest to obviously kill him off, because he's giving away information. So he gets shot as he's like all joyful and heading back to Murray, and this is where they feel like a nice little group, and where Murray has actually started bonding with Alexei, because he tries to save him, and he like grabs hold to him, puts him like round the corner, and obviously tries to find Hopper and Joyce. And it becomes a thing where the Russians start chasing Hopper. Round the fairground, you've got obviously Terminator guy, and there's a really great scene actually where Hopper is chased through a hall of mirrors by them, and he actually beats up one Russian, and it's good direction. It just looks good. The action playing out in this hall of mirrors type thing. But he beats up one guy, and then the Terminator guy comes in and like shoots him, and he's like staggering around. Eventually he escapes through like the back exit, and Joyce and Murray are there in the car, and Hopper, they make their escape, but obviously it's tragic because Alexei has been killed, and Joyce sells that really well as well. So I mean, even though the Hopper Joyce stuff hasn't been a highlight this season, I can't really fault too much of it in this episode. And once again, the drama is like really on point and track, and the stuff in this fairground is really nicely done. So I can't really fault anything in this episode. I think pretty much everything is doing its job, and there's some great drama, there's some great like horror, there's some great tension once again, and we're obviously amping up to like the final episode of this season. So it really shows what quality the Duffer Brothers have, and how much they understand the material and stuff. So it was a joy to watch the episode. It was very exciting. So that's episode 7, chapter 7 of Stranger Things 3. One more to go now, the season finale, and I will be back with it more. Look out for more Stranger Things throughout the week as we're getting ready for season 4. More discussion videos. There's discussions of season 2 and 3, like a season roundup with me and Rachel McDonald, that will be posted on the channel. 2 has already gone up before you listen to this, and 3 will be up later in the week. So more Stranger Things to come. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.